Welcome back. When I was a little boy, I felt pretty darn rich if I had a few pennies in my pocket. I think some people today just don't give the penny the respect it deserves. One of the readers of Good Old Days magazine, John Patton, had the same thoughts. He sent me a letter and came to the defense of the lowly penny.
There has been discussion during recent years of doing away with the 1-cent coin, the penny. Those in favor say that the copper has outlived its usefulness, that it has no practical value. I oppose retiring this noble coin to the Monetary Hall of Fame, and I come armed with convincing arguments and with a nostalgic lilt to my lonely voice, for it does have an intrinsic value. Think of all the familiar and obscure sayings that will no longer have a point of reference. A penny for your thoughts. You might joke that you were paying too high a price for a collected empty-headed nonsense, but the opposite is true. If you have the time and foresight to heed the words of others, you can harvest many a pearl of wisdom. Who hasn't enjoyed the pleasure of sitting and listening while a 4-year-old recounts the adventure of living and experiencing life's mysteries for the very first time? Think of the joy in a child's gleeful giggle. Your 2 cents worth. Talk about something that's usually overpriced. When most of us offer our 2 cents worth, more often we are presenting arguments against someone else's opinion or course of action. And much of the time our position is grounded on less than solid footing. How often has someone's enthusiasm for life been dashed by discouraging words whose origin is jealousy, envy, or spite? Why do so many of us have trouble allowing someone to bask in the sunlight, enjoying their moment of fame? Why do we insist on raining on everyone's parade? Ponder for a moment all of the wonderful little things in our lives that would lose their meaning if there were no penny. None of those marvelous mechanical banks from the 19th and 20th centuries would work, since 1 red cent triggered their amusing antics. If pennies are really from heaven, should we fool around with that? I sure don't want to tempt fate. And what would housewives and grandmothers find in the bottom of their purses? Think of all the empty-handed toddlers we would end up with. A toddler without a shiny penny in his or her hand or pocket will lose one of the all-time cheap thrills. Sure, they may not know it won't buy them anything, but isn't that part of the magic? A little child is perfectly happy running nowhere, clenching that worthless copper-colored circle of metal. It's all theirs, and no one will get upset if and when they lose it along the way. A lot to ask of a lowly little penny, isn't it? What has been suggested, should the noble penny be allowed to expire, is rounding off odd-cent purchases to the nearest nickel. Just how long do you think it would take before everything is pushed upward to the next nickel? Would you really waste your precious time arguing over pennies? I, for one, don't feel like enriching corporate America any more than I already do. The most important reason for not forsaking the penny has to do with the human spirit. All except the most wealthy of Americans has a penny jar, and for a goodly number of us, pennies are all we can afford to save. Anyway, what would we call penny candy if not penny candy? Sure, it sells for $1.99 for 8 pieces, but its charm would end if we called it dollar candy. Are we simply to forget the historical importance of our 1-cent coin, as if there had never been penny postcards? And what will become of penny loafers? Theater-goers would lose their 3-penny opera. I'll wager that one of those 3 coins in a fountain was a penny. In the days prior to circuit breakers, a penny kept many a weak fuse going just a little longer. And what of the post office and their 1-cent make-up stamp? Would they simply start raising the price of first-class mail a nickel at a time, adding more fuel to inflation? More power to the penny. A sacred rite of passage for grade school males has always been pitching pennies. Are we to deny school teachers that tool of learning, the lecture on the evils of gambling? And who didn't use a penny taped to the nose of a 50s-era toy glider to make it fly just so. I wonder if those 10-cent gliders are still made and sold today, allowing youngsters flights of fancy. Are we simply to turn our backs on the glorious 1-cent coin after it has been such a big part of our lives? If you are at least of baby boomer age, the words "a penny's worth" will conjure up some pleasant memories. Surely you recall standing in front of a glass-fronted candy case, trying to decide which items would best satisfy your sweet tooth, and just a few cents worth of the right candy could fuel your sweet tooth nearly all day. Memories such as these are truly priceless and worth preserving.
Pennies, nickels, and dimes were hard to come by in the good old days, much less the dollars it would take to have a portrait made. But Grace McCabe's father had just died, and her mother pulled together the money necessary to pay for the making of a portrait.
Door-to-door salesmen were a dime a dozen in the Depression years, trying to sell everything from shoelaces to portrait oil paintings. My mother bought something from each one who knocked on our door. Somehow that seemed to her a way of giving thanks to God for providing Dad a secure job at the cotton gin, where he worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week during the picking season, and 6 days the rest of the time. My dad died suddenly of a heart attack in 1933. After that tragic and trying time, Mother explained to each salesman who knocked at the door that she could buy only necessities. They understood and wished her well. 2 months after my father's death, a young man stopped and told her he had heard of her loss, but he had a different item to sell and thought she might want it. He was such a nice young man that she invited him inside. He asked her if she had any kind of picture, no matter how small, of my father that she would like enlarged to display. He told her of his company that could take a little snapshot, blow it up to any size, color it with oil paint, and then mount it in a gold-colored oval frame. All of this for only $35. Mother's mind was made up, and she had the perfect place to hang the portrait, over the piano, where everybody would see it the moment they came in the front door. What was so surprising was that she didn't bat an eye when he told her she would have to pay cash for it, in advance. The young man waited patiently as Mother took her precious picture from the album, then slowly passed it over to him. He held it and studied it for a few minutes, before asking her for more information, which he wrote in a little book. "That the granddaughter your husband is holding?" When she told him it was, he assured her there would be no problem, for his company could do practically anything to make a picture look as good as new. Mother smiled, remembering that Sunday afternoon when they celebrated the first birthday of their only granddaughter. "Let's see now. We can do it this way. We'll take off the little girl. Your husband is already wearing a white shirt, but it needs to be buttoned up. We can do that. And put on a dark blue tie that will look good with the navy blue coat we put on him. We'll have him looking like he just came home from church. The hat he's got on looks fine. We can leave that as it is." All the time he was talking about the hat, Mother was trying to get a word in edgewise. "What did you say, Mrs. Lanier?" Hesitantly she answered him. Would it be too much trouble to take his hat off? Mr. Lanier had such a fine head of hair, and he was so proud he didn't have one single gray hair. He got his coal-black hair from his French ancestry, you know. "You want him bareheaded, huh? Sorry I didn't think of that myself. What side did your husband part his hair on?" Mother, who was not known for her sense of humor or ready wit, really outdid herself that day, as she answered him with a straight face. "Why, anybody in your company can see that when they take his hat off." A month later the order was delivered parcel post. It was a perfect likeness of Dad, and everything the young salesman had promised. It looked so right hanging where she had envisioned it the day she trusted a stranger with what was then a great sum of money. Her faith paid off.
Like I'd reach for a star, worshiping you from afar, living with my silent love. like a flame dying out in the rain. Only the ashes remain, smoldering like my silent love. How I long to tell all the things I have planned. Still, it's wrong to tell. You would not understand. You go along, never dreaming I care, loving somebody somewhere, leaving me my silent love. How I long to tell all the things I have planned. Still, it's wrong to tell. You would not understand. For you go along, never dreaming I care, loving somebody somewhere, leaving me my silent
That was My Silent Love, performed by Martha Tilton on the Fibber, McGee, and Molly Show, November 18th, 1941. In thinking of springtime, I also think of that time of practical jokes, April Fool's Day. What would it be like to have an April Fool's birthday? Nada Johnson knows. She was an April Fool child.
The Depression days of the early 30s were hard on everyone, especially the poor. I remember one instance when just having enough food on the table was a big problem at our house. I grew up on a small farm in northern Kentucky. We always lived in the country where we raised our own garden as well as having pigs, chickens, and a cow. It seemed for some reason we were always short on eggs. It could have been we were just short on hens. Maybe we had been blessed with too many visits from the preacher for Sunday dinner, which was often the case. This may have been the cause for our shortage of laying hens. I have never figured out why I was the one to be left out when there was an egg shortage, but this is the way it happened most of the time. Mom would divide with the toddlers, even though she had none left for herself. I suppose I was too big to be considered little, and too little to be considered big. After all, I was the 9th child in a family of 13. There were Helen, Douglas, and Garnet, all younger than me. My baby sister, Dorothy Jo, hadn't been born at this time. Mom would always have some excuse for not eating. "No, I'm tired of eggs," she would say. "You children go ahead and eat them." Then she would go into another room and busy herself with some household chore until we were finished. We didn't know until later that Mom was probably going hungry herself. Mom would usually get up early in order to get the fire going in the wood range to warm the large kitchen. She would often have breakfast ready before waking us up. Since I was an April Fool child, being born on the 1st of April, I often tried to live up to my birthright. Like the time I heard someone say the cow was going dry. To remedy the situation, I got a large tub and took it to the pasture. Then I carried water from the well until the tub was full. One thing for sure, we wouldn't have to worry about our cow going dry now. Mom always said, "Leave it to Nada, she'll think of something every time." This time, since the hens were responsible, they were the ones I should talk to about the egg shortage. I didn't actually talk to them, but wrote them a note instead. It went something like this: "Mrs. Hen, please, could you lay one more egg each day? I always seem to get left out. Little girls get hungry too, you know. Love, Nada." While no one was looking, I sneaked out to the hen house. One hen was on the nest. Some hens and a rooster were scratching in the dirt. Where should I put the note? Should I try to put it under the hen that was already on the nest? I decided against this for fear of scaring her away. Then she might not lay at all. I finally decided to tack it up where all the hens could see it. I stuck it on a rusty nail that was always there, and pounded it down with a rock so the wind would not blow it off. I read it one more time to make sure the hens would understand, then hurried quickly back to the house. I could hardly sleep that night for wondering about the note. Next morning I hurried down to breakfast as usual, not knowing what to expect. I could hardly believe my eyes. There it was on my plate as big as day. I shook myself to see if I were dreaming. Then I heard Mom say, "The hens have started laying better. I believe I'll have an egg myself this morning." After that, the eggs became more plentiful. I could once again enjoy the taste of eggs for breakfast. I don't remember just how old I was when this incident occurred. I have never heard of hens going to school, but they must have a secret learning technique all their own. I don't know whether I really expected the hens to get the message, or whether this was a respectful way of letting the rest of the family know that I, too, would appreciate an egg for breakfast. Probably the latter. Someone besides the chickens must have seen the note, because I was often teased about it. If we were short on milk, for instance, someone was sure to say, "Send the cow a note." As I look back on this incident, it seems ridiculous and humorous, but maybe we could all learn a lesson from it. Instead of blaming someone who is not responsible, go to the source of the problem. Then perhaps it will be more readily solved.
April Fool jokes were sometimes elaborate. Take, for instance, Larry Cook's memory of April Fool.
When I was a boy, the greatest thrill was to be able to successfully pull an April Fool's joke. My whole family are practical jokers. I especially remember one April Fool's Day, when I was older, one almost got out of hand. My wife and I were sitting at the breakfast table. It all started with her simple suggestion, "Have you remembered this is April Fool's Day?" Like most Hoosiers, she loves a joke. I took up the phone and called up each of my two elderly, fun-loving aunts, Jessie Plain and Nora Shure, disguising my voice. I said, "The water tower sprung a leak, and they'll be turning off the water at 8 o'clock. Each, with much distress in her voice, thanked me. Then I thought of a couple of my prank-playing neighbors. I'd called them, saying I was my brother Cicero's marshal, Jerry Cook. I called Floyd Trout. He's retired and sleeps late. I said, "Hey, Trouty, this is Jerry." The sleepy man on the other end didn't seem to know who I was and hung up on me. I said to Narrated, "I must have gotten the wrong number. Look it up for me." No, it wasn't the wrong number. I rung again. He answered, and I said, "Trouty?" Yeah. This is Jerry Cook." "Oh, yeah, Jerry, what's the matter?" "The water tower sprung a leak, and they're going to turn off the water about 8 o'clock. "Oh, much obliged." "Sure appreciate that, Jerry, taking the time to call. Thanks a lot." I got Clell Miller, another neighbor, on the line. I again said I was my brother. I could hear him yell, "Jan, you better hurry and get up. They're going to turn off the water at 8 o'clock. Get them dishes washed real fast, and draw out some buckets of it, and put drinking water in the refrigerator." By the time I'd finished my coffee and got my coat and hat on, Clell was at my door to see if anyone had called me about the water leak. We walked uptown together. He looked all around the water tower, and there wasn't a soul back there. We passed Trouty, already dressed and uptown, coming from the post office. Clell said to him, "Where in the heck is that water leak?" "Well, they tell me it's over at the water tower." Bud Griffin, the town maintenance man, was busily sweeping the streets. I could see Clell's uneasiness, and he said, "Bud, why aren't you over there fixing that leak instead of sweeping these gall-darn streets?" Bud just nodded and kept right on sweeping. Bus Lewis walked up to me. "You got about an hour, Larry. I want to sit down and talk business with you." I told him about the water leak, and then he pushed himself away. "Oh, I don't have an hour to talk now, Larry. I'd better get on home and shave and take a shower. I have a funeral to go to." Clell yelled in to Ruth Fry, the tavern cook, "Better get all the water you need. The water tower sprung a leak." She filled up a lot of containers. Bill Carey, the tavern owner, he went home and filled everything with water. Pee-wee Pearson, having breakfast, asked Ruth to call his wife. Ruth said, Pee-wee told me to call you that the water was going to be turned off." "Yes," she broke in. "One of the nurses at the nursing home already called and told me, and they have all that washing to do and baths to give and all." I stopped Tom Whistler, the rural mail carrier, as he was going to work. He told everyone working at the post office. Every little while, as he was sorting the mail, he'd go to the water cooler and run it. "Yes, we still have water," he'd tell everyone. At the restaurant, they hurried on to the noon meal. Those sitting around having morning coffee pondered the problem. A fire? School called off? Barbershops close? The laundromat? I went on back home. I got through to Aunt Jessie, and I said in my own voice this time, "Aunt Jess, this is Larry." "Yes, Larry, what's it with you?" "Well, I worked late this morning. My wife's already gone to work, and by gosh, I don't have any water, and I need to take a shower and to shave." "Oh," she said, "didn't Mr. Renner call you?" "Mr. Renner is on the town board." "Well, no, why?" I asked. "Well, Larry, Mr. Renner called me a good bit ago and said they had a busted main up there, and the water would be shut off from 8 o'clock this morning till about 6 this evening." I said, "Why, don't you have any water?" "Yes, I went down to the basement and got all my empty pans and everything and drew out water and filled them, and the sink and the bathtub is full." Oh, I could see her doing all that. She's such a meticulous housekeeper. "Well, then, is there a chance I could just come down there and you heat up some water, at least enough so I could wash my face off and shave?" "Honey, you just come ahead," she said. I said, "Thanks. Thanks, Aunt Jessie. April Fool." She stammered. Do you mean, you mean that wasn't Stan Renner that called me?" "No, that was me." "Why, Larry, I have water setting all over and—" Then we had a good laugh. For a long, long time, Aunt Nora's line kept being busy. When I was finally able to get through to her, I went along with the same story. Could I come down to let her heat me up a little water to shave by? "Why, yes." She was so concerned. "Yes, but I just can't imagine why you, the county sheriff, why they didn't call you first thing. I just don't understand." I said, "Why don't you go do me a favor? Go and see if your water is turned off." She went and was right back. "Why, yes, Larry, I still have water. You just get on down here." I said, "April Fool." She kind of choked. "What? What? Oh, no, you're kidding me." "Why, I called everybody. Everybody. What am I going to tell them? I called Marion Walker 'cause she was going to give me a permanent today, and she canceled me out and said she'd hurry and call off all the others for the day. Oh, my. Why, I've called the whole blessed town. What will I tell them?" "Just tell them, April Fool."
Mothers sometimes had to nip pranks in the bud on those April Fool's days of long ago. Berniece VanDusen's mother finally made a few house rules to govern April pranks.
As soon as I gave Central our telephone number, I slid my metal notebook ring around the neck of our black stem table telephone to hold the receiver down when the operator innocently rang our number. To my delight, Dad rushed into the living room from his hot noon lunch. He had no thought of schoolgirl nonsense, or of the day, as he called a futile "Hello? Hello? Hello?" into the transmitter, with a puzzled expression. I was giggling too much to call April Fool. After that, Mother made several rules. Number 1, no more telephone jokes. A telephone is not a toy. Someone might need the line for an emergency. Number 2, no more table tricks. Switching sugar for salt and vice versa, which had been no end of fun. We had never heard of the annual red flannel pancake trick. I learned that one when I was too adult to participate. I was boarding in a family of 10 children when I taught in the Catskill Mountains. The oldest son laid a red cloth circle on the hot griddle and poured batter over it. Then he called upstairs to the next oldest to hurry down while his breakfast was hot. All unsuspecting, my 8th grader buttered and syruped his cake and cut into it. He sawed away with his knife as he talked, not catching on until he had a bite in his mouth. Then memory came flooding back, and he jumped up, ready to fool the next comer. Each of my pupils became victim in turn, all the way down to the sleepy-head first grader, who was the last one to the table. When he couldn't manage to get a bite of the deliciously browned flapjack, he burst into tears. Then Mother stopped the proceedings. The preschool girl and baby honey boy would get their turn next year, the first grader seemed to think, judging by his expression. Rule number 3 for us girls. We were forbidden to tell an outright lie. It was all right to fold a piece of paper and ask the store clerk, "Do you want to see the funny picture I drew?" We weren't exactly happy about those hampering rules, but when I pulled a raveling off Mother's dress, and pulled, and pulled, and pulled some more, until I discovered the concealed spool of thread inside her blouse, I forgave her the rules, as I wound the thread back onto the spool. Keeping the rules would probably develop our ingenuity. I should have been suspicious at school when a girl who was no special friend of mine passed me a bag of candy. Treats were usually reserved for best friends, and I wouldn't normally have been included in her generosity. But who could resist those chocolate-covered tidbits? Mine had a piece of toothbrush inside. That girl had gone to a lot of trouble and some expense for her disgusting trick. April Fool's Day didn't end at dark. In the early evening, we sisters packed a small change purse with folded paper. We tied on a dark string. Then, after carelessly dropping it onto the sidewalk, we hid in the alley between the stores on Main Street. At first, nobody in that Saturday night shopping crowd noticed. We had thought nobody could resist a fat pocketbook. When a young lady in the small-town throng finally stooped with her hand out, we jerked the string before she touched the purse. It was such fun to slide it away while calling "April Fool," though the girl declared to her friends that she had thought it was a hop-toad. Although I've finally outgrown playing tricks myself, I can still be fooled by the oldest of them all. When a neighbor boy said, "There's a worm on your head," it seemed reasonable, since I was sitting in the yard under the trees. Maybe adults are the ones to fool, because they don't usually get mad or disappointed. They usually laugh good-naturedly, probably remembering their own youth.